Hi, welcome to the webcast Looking Towards the Future, using person-centered planning tools pre-K through adulthood. My name is Teresa Cogar. I'm a training staff person at the Virginia Commonwealth University Autism Center for Excellence. During today's presentation, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the person-centered planning process. I'd also like to introduce some tools to you that you can use with individuals with ASD and intellectual disability to help you through that process. I'd also like to talk to you about how to adapt those tools so that they're important to the person using those tools as they go through the process. Currently, our students have many open doors towards their future. It's important that as we take them through the person-centered planning process that we keep those doors open. Sometimes in education, we get wrapped up in all the things that we have to do, the IEPs, the transition planning, and oftentimes some of those doors close, and we make decisions for our individuals instead of with them. What if we could use the decision-making process and look at all of the alternatives, all of the uncertainty in our students' life, looking at consequences, their interpersonal relationships, all of the complexity in their lives, and really sit down with them and look at those on a personal level, looking with the people in their lives and saying, how does this impact the people around them? How can we build a positive and possible future for them? We're looking at everything in their life and making a road for them to be successful. And that's making decisions with them, looking at when things are happening in their life. Who are the important people in their life? What is going on around them? How will that impact what happens next to them? Where are they going in life? Their relationships, their employment, what's happening to them in school. Why is that so important to them, and how is that going to impact them? And not making decisions for them. It's really important to understand that our individuals with autism spectrum disorder and intellectual disabilities have the capacity and the capability. It's their right to make their own decisions, and we should not make them for them. We should help make decisions with them. So let me talk to you a little bit about what is person-centered planning. Person-centered planning is a decision-making process to plan for the future. And you may think to yourself, well, we already do that in schools. We have IEP meetings, we have transition planning meetings. But what I'm going to talk to you about throughout the duration of this presentation is how we can really make even those processes more person-centered. It's going to take some time on our part, and it's going to take some dedication, but it's well worth it for the individual in the long term for us to do so. It's going to increase the individual's quality of life long term by developing a plan to support their hopes and their dreams and passions. We must remember that all individuals, especially our individuals with autism spectrum disorder, do have hopes and dreams and passions. It's our job to find out what those are and to promote those throughout their educational careers so that they can become successful adults in society and in their community. It brings together a support network of people to help support individuals to reach their desired outcomes. So whether that's friendships, whether that is to have a relationship, whether that's to have some sort of employment once they transition out of school. It's our job, again, to help bring together a support network of people, not just the people within the school, but the people that are a part of their life outside of school to help achieve those outcomes for them. So it involves a dedicated team. And I know so many of us in the schools are already dedicated to what we do for our students. And yes, it takes extra time and it takes a lot of involvement on our part to make sure those teams come together. And especially during planning meetings, it takes a lot of effort on our part to get all those people to the table. And the main person that needs to be at that table is the student. And I urge people who are out there, and there's a lot of people already doing this throughout the state, no matter the person's abilities, and I like to use the word abilities rather than the deficit model, include them at the table, even from their earliest age. I know that I put pre-K in here. We do have young individuals as early as 4 that we are including in meetings. So make sure that if you don't feel it's appropriate at that age, at least let them know that you're talking about them. People understand what is going on more than we give them credit for. So from early on, let's make sure that our individuals that we're working with know that we are talking about their future. We understand that they have hopes and dreams and that we want them to succeed. And that's very, very important. Think about what you're currently doing in your school system. It's a paradigm shift for us to continue to include students in IEP meetings and transition plan, even though that's the law and they should be included. It's still somewhat of a paradigm shift. And we want to continue to shift that paradigm in encouraging people all across the state and outside of the state to include individuals in their own person-centered plans and also as part of those meetings within the school. And if you're already doing that, a big kudos to you, because I know there are so many places that are doing that, and we encourage you and give you big kudos for that. Thank you. It's really about changing mindsets, which is difficult. For a long time in school divisions, we've had the mindset that children in special education students, we're going to have meetings and we're going to make decisions for them, like I said before. And so we really, if the only true failure is when we walk away and we assume incompetence. And we have to presume competence for our individuals with disabilities, especially our individuals with autism spectrum disorder, no matter what their cognitive functioning level is or their communication level is, whether they're nonverbal or verbal. We have to presume competence, and we have to include them in what we are doing and making sure that they understand what we are doing, and that we're taking into consideration, again, their strengths, their interests, their preferences, their needs, their hopes, and their dreams. Dr. Beth Mount, who wrote a book, she's written several books, but she wrote a book called Person-Centered Planning, Finding Directions for Change using Personal Futures Planning. This is actually will be at the end of your PowerPoint presentation so that you can get this book if you'd like. It's a great book. But Dr. Beth Mount talks a lot about person-centered versus system-centered. And so, again, in schools, we are a system. That's totally understandable. But sometimes in our system, we focus on labels. We emphasize deficits and needs instead of what are students' capabilities and gifts. We depend on professionals to make the judgments instead of bringing in more of the family and people who work directly with the individual outside of the school to help us build good descriptions of who those individuals really are. We also invest a lot in standardized testing and assessments. We also have a lot of, generate a lot of written reports about our students. So lots of times when our students come to the table, their picture is their label. I might be a student with ASD. Here's all of the things that I need. Here's all the testing that says what I need, and so let's make some decisions about me. And all of those things we do need in the school system. What we also need is, who is this individual? A person should always be a person first and not their label. So instead of an individual with autism, they should just be an individual. The label should always come second. What does that individual need as just an individual who has communication needs, who has social needs, who maybe has some behavioral needs? Just like anybody else, we should see that person as a person and not as their label. Spend time getting to know that person. Some of our individuals with autism, actually all of them that I know, are some of the most amazing people that I know. And they have more capabilities and gifts than I've ever thought of, and that I have. So getting to know them, their capabilities and gifts, and how we can use those instructionally and how we can use those to benefit them in their future, what that might look like for them in employment, in relationships, in social skills, if they're ever in a DA program, if they're going to go out into the community, how we can use that even in school on our field trips and in the lunchroom with social skills and all the things we work on in school. It's really important to get to know the person, just like we would get to know any other individual. And again, looking at the individual in the context of the family and the community that they live in. And I understand that sometimes those are a little harder relationships to have. And we have to have boundaries within those relationships. But person-centered planning is, let's bring all the people to the table, not just the parent guardian. If we have a grandparent or a neighbor who really knows that individual well and knows what reinforces them, knows what they have, this great gift, they're a great guitar player, and every Sunday they play the guitar at church. Let's know about that so that maybe we can get that child involved in music. Maybe we can foster that gift so that someday that can be either a leisure skill for them or maybe even a career. The importance of person-centered planning, there's many things, but it really, again, I think I've emphasized, helps to focus on seeing the person as a total person. And our students in special education go a long time, up to 22 years. So it's really important early on, and this is why I mentioned pre-K, that we really get to see the person for who they are from the minute they walk into school at an early age, by the time they leave us, and really focus on that total person. And as they're going through their time with us, things change, and that we take that person-centered plan and we continue to tweak it as they change and grow, so that we're growing with them and that we see the total person as they grow through the years. Person-centered planning, the importance is to really recognize the desires. Even our desires, hopes, and dreams change, theirs will as well. We don't want to peg or put someone on the track of this is what they're going to do when they graduate, or this is going to be our transition plan, we're going to stick to this and nothing's going to change. All things change. And so the person-centered plan is, what is happening to our student? What are their hopes and dreams? Have they changed? And is it reasonable for them? Is it reasonable for the people around them, just like anyone else? And how are we going to help them get there? And to discover ways to think about the individual's future. Again, there's lots of things that we have to think about with any individual student that we're working with, but especially a student with autism spectrum disorder and an intellectual disability. There's lots of things we have to think about as we go through life, and what is their quality of life going to be overall, especially when parents are caregivers have gone. Can they advocate for themselves? Who's going to take care of them? Are they able to express their wants and their needs? What's working for them? What's not working for them? Are they able to have a quality of life that they want, that's important to them? Outcomes from person-centered planning should be, first and foremost, that the individual really knows themselves. And again, we can foster that throughout the years by using some of these tools I'm going to show you in a moment. But really having them know themselves so they can advocate for themselves. The biggest thing we know in the disability world is really, really important for our individuals, especially on the spectrum, to be able to advocate for themselves. That way they're not in danger, that way they know, again, what do I want for me, and how can I express that in a way that I won't put myself in harm's way, that I can do that in a way that's respectful to others, respectful to myself. Being able to express what they want, they like, and what they don't like. Again, having that just better quality of life overall, to be able to have those employment. Do I want to work at Walmart? Do I want to go on to get a college degree? Many of our students with autism spectrum disorder go on to college, and so we should encourage that. Relationships, boyfriend, girlfriend, partner of life. Are my relationships with my friends, my co-workers, very important. And living arrangements. Again, what are living arrangements going to look for me down the road? Something that we should really be looking at, not just at the high school level, but maybe even just a little earlier, getting that person-centered planning team ready for how to not only help that person understand what's going to happen, but that team as well. So we really need to think about what our students need, especially our students on the autism spectrum. And I had the luxury of working on the I'm Determined project for many years, and we would travel around the state, and I'm going to show you some tools from that project in just a moment, and I'm going to share with you the website at the end. But I want to encourage you to always think about what your students need. As we were traveling the state and we were presenting tools, we would present tools, and oftentimes people in the crowd would say, well, but this won't work for my student. My student has intellectual disability, or my student has autism spectrum disorder. And I thought to myself, but it will. And so one day I said to my friend, and who's the director of the project, also John McNaught, I said, you know, these will work for these individuals. We need to add pictures, we need to add objects, we need to add those things, because this is the way that they learn, this is the way they communicate, this is the way they respond to things. And so he granted me permission, and we made it happen. And so we started presenting these things across the state, and it really took off. And so many of you are probably using these in your schools already. And the reason I mention these as person-centered planning tools is because self-determination is one of the keys to person-centered planning. You have to have problem-solving skills. You have to have self-advocacy skills. You have to have the ability to make decisions. And so these tools are just a piece of how to make something person-centered, and I'm going to explain to you a little bit later how we are going to incorporate these person-centered tools into the system that we already have as a school system. So again, just thinking about how do our students learn, many, not all, but many of our students with autism are visual learners, very kinesthetic. So again, adapting the tools that I'm going to show you using pictures, objects, making them tactile so that they can take the board maker or the real picture off of the tool and handing it to somebody is very important to them. How do they communicate? Again, not all of our students are verbal, but that doesn't mean they don't know what's going on, and it doesn't mean that they don't have hopes, dreams, desires, interests, and preferences. So it's our job to make sure that we have a tool and a way to communicate with them, and they have a way to communicate with us. So we need to respond accordingly. And how do they respond? The tools I'm getting ready to show you are a way for them to respond to us as well. It's a way for them to communicate. Again, it's a way for them to communicate those strengths, interests, and preferences and needs. And again, we really need to think about, especially with people on the spectrum, who are the important people in their life. People on the spectrum really do form strong bonds with other people. And it's those people they form the strongest bonds with that we need to be in touch with, because they know those students and individuals the best. And so when we find out who are those important people in their life and what awesome capabilities they have and that what they've learned from them, we can really have a wonderful person-centered plan. So I'm going to talk to you about some tools to use. The Good Day Plan, the OnePager, and goal setting are all from the I'm Determined project. And maps and paths, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about those, are tools that have been around in the person-centered planning world for a long time. Let's briefly talk about the Good Day Plan. Again, this is kind of a good day for me when I have lunch, when I get to talk to my friends, and when I get my Starbucks coffee. So this is what the Good Day Plan looks like originally when you go on the I'm Determined site. And I'll briefly give you that site, and like I said, it's going to be at the end of your PowerPoint. It's www.imdetermined.org. This is what it looks like originally, and this is what we were going around and showing people, and they said this is great. You can write on this, you can draw on this, you can do whatever. Okay, so it's what happens on a good day, does it happen now, what needs to happen to make it a good day, and who can help me. So again, very person-centered, because we're asking the student or the individual, what happens to you? Instead of us saying, this is what happens to you on a good day, And at the beginning of teaching this tool, you might have to help that student. Remember, our students with ASD do have some issues with problem solving. So they might not know if you ask them what happens on a good day. Remember, it's those problem solving questions that they do have difficulty with. You might have to help them understand that process at first. But then once that process starts rolling, we want them to start to come to their own answers. Does it happen now? Here's where you can write anything. You can write yes, you can write no, you can write sometimes, you can write always. What happens to make it a good day? This is where the problem solving really comes in. And then who can help me? So in the person-centered planning world, my friend Mac MacArthur and I, she works at the TTAC in Blacksburg, Virginia Tech, or actually she works at Radford, sorry Mac. We came to the decision that some of our students, that was a little difficult for. So we had to go to a person-centered planning tool, which is what's called important to me and important for me. So we had to take a step back. And this does come from the person-centered planning world. So we put it on the template and we decided what happens on a good day, what's important to me and what's important for me. So what might be important to me is listening to my music. What might be important for me is taking my medicine and helping students differentiate what is important to me versus what's important for me. Here's one that is differentiated. You can see it has pictures. Very important in the world of autism, right, is checklists. Right, when something's finished, I need to check it off. So if I've had my hot cocoa during the day, what happens on a good day? I've had my hot cocoa. Does it happen now? Once in a while. What needs to happen to make it a good day? So basically what needs to make it happen every day? I need to put a hot cocoa packet and mug by the microwave each night before I go to bed. So that's that problem solving. So imagine this. If you are in school and you're having an issue with a student and you're just trying to get them through the day and you wanted to make it about the person. So here's where we start to bring person-centered planning into our school system when we say, hey, we want to help you get through the day. This is about you. This is not about our forms, our procedures. It is about our procedures, but this isn't just about a form filling out saying you had a bad day and we hope you come back tomorrow, you get it together. This is about, let's make it person-centered. Let's make it about you. You have trouble on the bus and you need headphones. Every day when you come to school, you're having problems getting off the bus. So instead of you're having problems every day after the bus, let's take it to the person. Let's find out what is going on with you. Let's talk to the bus driver. Let's talk to mom and figure out what happened before. And let's actually put it on a piece of paper, on a plan, so that every day the individual with autism, who is very visual, who needs to see that, who needs to be reminded of that, can have a successful day because it's in front of them. Remember, our individuals with autism, we're feeding them all of these things when they're trying to process auditorily. It floods their brain. And I've heard many individuals with autism say, when you say something to me, I have to stop and I have to process it and then I have to think about it again. The visual and adapting it in a way that makes sense to them is the key to making it person-centered so that it makes sense to them and we're involving them in their own learning and we're involving them in their own planning. And then who can help me? We have mom for some of these, we have case manager. Again, you know, the goal at the end is always to be the individual, and if it's not the individual at first, that's okay. We want whatever support system is there to be there. Here's just another one. You can see at the beginning, they have a couple visuals, again with some kind of like a task analysis underneath. What happens on a good day? I put my coat in my locker, I use the bathroom, I clock in and on time. Does it happen now? There's a thumbs down. Another great way to communicate. It doesn't always have to be words. Again, how does that individual with autism communicate? What do they understand? What do they respond to? Again, these can be Velcroed icons on the sheet where they can then hand it to you. Again, remember, it's not just a communication tool for you to give them, it's also for them to communicate to you as well. And then you can see they talk about setting the timer would help. And then who can help me? Dad. So just some things on that one. Oh, before I go on to the next one, I do want to just mention that each of these tools that I'm showing you, there's a whole video on the I'm Determined site about these differentiated tools, and it's called Differentiating. For instance, this is a Good Day Plan. So if you go on the www I'm Determined site and you go under Good Day Plan, there'll be a video. There's many videos. There's a video called Differentiating the Good Day Plan. And what I want you to see under there is there's how we also differentiate the tools using objects, using board maker pictures, and other variety of ways how these tools were used. Because when I say pre-K through adulthood, you may be wondering, well, Teresa, how do I use this with pre-K? You might just start with one column. We often say to people, you don't have to present this whole thing at one time. You just might say, what happens on a good day? And you might have that little coat icon object on that in that square. You might present it to the kid, and then you might have, does it happen now? You might have a thumbs up. But you're teaching the child what makes them a good day. You're using the person as the center of what their world is about, and you're teaching them what is important for them, what's important to them, and how their world is going to be successful. But you're making them the center of what is going to happen to make them successful. This is just an example of the one-pager. Again, I know lots of people in Virginia are using these tools, and I know that the state is so appreciative of that because it's really changing lives. And it's really changing lives of people with autism spectrum disorder. The one-pager, this is just an example of some things that you can, maybe some questions, examples of what you might put underneath. It says my strengths, my interests, my preferences, my needs. The great thing about these templates, for instance, you can change the titles. If you wanted to change my interests to something else, you could. Sometimes under my needs, they put my accommodations. So the one-pager has been a great way to use in the present level of performance in the IEP. I'm going to talk about that a little later. But you can actually change the titles of some of these things to meet the student's needs if you'd like. But again, always promote it in a positive way, always about what capabilities, gifts, strengths, preferences. So I want to show you an example of one that I actually made about myself. My strengths are that I'm a visual learner, that I'm very good about appointments and reminders. I'm very good about remembering on June 30th, I'm actually going to, to see someone I have an appointment with. I'm very good at remembering those things. My interests are listening to music. I also write music, and I love to play instruments. My preferences are I actually live in a very wooded area, 3 hours from here, but I really do like coming to the city. I like working in the city. I like going to Washington, D.C., to jazz clubs to listen to music. My needs are I need a lot of sleep now that I'm getting older. Again, you saw friends in my good day plan. Here's kind of another reiteration of this. I really need to be around my friends. It's really important. I'm a people person and I like being with my friends. And I need my computer when I'm not at work. And I need help with computer needs. So it's just something I put together. These are board maker pictures. You can put line drawings in here, right? You could put real pictures in here. You could put objects in here. Okay, so the limits, it's actually limitless. So I really want you to, as educators and people who serve individuals on the spectrum, we are creative thinkers. We think outside the box. So I want us to continue to do that as we think of these tools. Again, if this is too overwhelming for an individual, start with the one thing. Start with my strengths. Build that individual up and think about the person and just start, here are your strengths. And every day go through that with them. Here are your strengths. Then start with, hey, here are your strengths and your interests. Okay, we don't have to do the whole thing at one time. We can start building it up, because the whole part of a person-centered plan is to build that person and to build the total focus around that person, so that they know who they are by the time they exit our services, so that when they are in adulthood and they actually do person-centered planning, we've given them a heads up. We've given them a gain. We've given them the ability to already know who they are, so they don't have to figure that out later. Here's a great one. You can see there's real pictures in here, and there's there's a thumbs up in here. I love this one because this is from Joe, and Joe says, here's what I'd like to do. You can see how the titles have been changed. Again, use what works for you and the individual you work with. I like to recycle. I like to deliver paper. If you think about our students with autism, this is a classic one, right? You're going to get these kind of answers, and I really love this. Accommodations at work, hey, verbal praise. This is really important, because when you're making a person-centered plan and you're thinking about what works for that individual, hey, verbal praise works for me. Or, hey, I like a high five. Or, I like when you take me out into the community and we go for a walk in the park. Those things are really, really important. If that individual can't say it to you, the importance about the person-centered planning is having that team of people who know that individual, who will be able to say it to you about that individual. So those things can still be put on this plan, and that's why it's important to get that team of around you who knows that individual. Accommodations work, my augmentative communication system. Things I want in the future: to graduate, to attend senior breakfast, to attend prom. So some things that maybe think individuals didn't know about Joe, but because Joe had a team around him who did know those things about him, we were able to put it down on paper. Goal setting. Everyone does goal setting, but again, we're talking about not just at the IEP or the transition time, but we're talking about early on in kindergarten. What is a goal I want to do? Maybe I just want to sit in circle time today. Maybe I just want to sing a song with my group today. And so that's going to be the goal. Maybe I want to go on a CBI trip. And in order to do that, I need to have calm hands, and I need to listen to directions, and I need to follow the teacher. And so you have board maker picture icons. If you look at the differentiated video, that's actually one of the examples that I gave. And so you can think outside of the box, and you can think about those goals and what those students need, and you use it as a teaching tool for our students with autism. Because again, if you ask them what a goal is, may they come up with it right away? No, but it's our job to help them understand what goal setting is, how you can get there, what things you need to do to get there. So hence the goal setting template. In the middle, you put what that goal is. Again, right there in the middle of this, you can print these off from the website. And what I always used to do is laminate them, slap some Velcro in the middle of there, and put a board maker icon or a picture or an object, and put that in the middle. So my goal is, like I said, to go on a CBI trip, and that picture would go in the middle. The rays are, what are the outcomes going to be? So it could be, I make friends. I get to go out in the community. You don't have to fill every arrow. It could just be a couple of things. But teaching students, what are the outcomes? What are the great and positive things that get to happen for you and the people around you, because you've got to go on that community-based trip. And then what do I need to get there? And those are the steps. And again, along the bottom, I just put 3 board maker icons, and it was calm hands, following the teacher, etc. Here's one, again, comes from my friend down at Rafford, and her daughter, she wanted to move out. And this is when we talk about the person-centered plan. They had done a person-centered plan, and they said to themselves, well, she's just going to live with us. And the daughter was like, well, I really don't want to live at home. And it was kind of a shocker. But they worked through it, and they said, okay, well, if you want to move out, we need to really goal set, and here's some things we need to do. And so this is how they adapted this, and I really love this. They put the icons, as you can see in the middle. She was a reader, so they used words as well. You can see that one of her one of her goals of moving out, one of the outcomes that she hoped to get was a man. So again, very volunteering job, but very real life things. These are things that we really have to listen to, consider, be aware of, and respect about our individuals with disabilities, because they are like you and I. They still have the same wants and needs and desires. And so we have to take them seriously. And knowing these things, knowing that roommates, hobbies, a man, there's some other instructional pieces that need to go in there. So we have to talk about safety and sexual safety and all of those kinds of things. And so keep working on that. But what do I need to get there? So they adapted this by making boxes. Okay, so you want roommates. Here's a checklist. Remember, we're teaching individuals with autism. Let's make a checklist of things you have to do in order to have those roommates. And the same with some of the other outcomes as well. So again, the great thing is this is very person-centered, because this tool was very much adapted for this individual alone, and it was all about her wants, needs, and desires. So I think this is a great way to show the person-centered piece. So let's just talk a little bit about MAPS. I couldn't do a person-centered planning presentation without mentioning MAPS, which is Making Action Plans, which was created by Marsha Forrest and Jack Pierpoint from Inclusion Press. And they really were the creators of this person-centered philosophy. And they have wonderful materials, and you'll see that there's a lot of similarities to the things that the I'm Determined project uses. Maps are great things. They're tools that you can use at your fingertips tomorrow, just like you can the I'm Determined tools. For instance, they have a working and what's not working. So again, you can sit down with the individual and you can say what's working for you and what's not working for you, and really find out from the individual what is, you might be surprised by their answers, and be prepared for those, because some of those might be something instructionally that might not be working for them in your classroom. Remember, especially with students with ASD, it might be the lights are too strong for me, or there's a smell in the back of the classroom that I smell every day. Could we work on getting rid of that, or could we put a different smell in place? Or remember, our students with ASD have different things that happen to them that may not happen to other individuals. So that could affect how their behavior. That could affect what they're doing instructionally, how they're engaged in a task. So to really sit down and engage with them and find out what's going on is very important. You saw the important 2 and important 4 in what I presented in the I'm Determined tool. This is very in the adult services world. If you're watching from the adult services world, this is something you do all the time. This is on the ISP. This is something that I see pretty regularly. This is what you start with. What's important to the individual and what's important for the individual as you go through. What's great about maps is there's all kinds of maps. There's a Your Story map where you find out what the story is of the individual. From their birth to wherever they're at right now in their life. There's actually a nightmare map as well. This individual put, my nightmare is to be lonely with no support. Again, you have to be ready to hear what these individuals are going to communicate to you, whether that's verbally or non-verbally, correct? Something that we just always need to be thinking about, because remember, it's not just our verbal students who are going to be engaged in these person-centered planning process. It's going to be students and individuals who are nonverbal as well. So whether they're communicating through us, through a device, through sign, through pictures, through whatever that means is. We have to be able to be prepared for that. There's dreams. There's a relationship map where you draw the person in the middle, and you draw the important people around them in their life. And there's so many maps, and you can find them through Marcia Forrest and Jack Pierpoint, or you could also find them in the Dr. Beth Mountain book that is going to be at the end of your PowerPoint as well. But the whole point with maps is you can bring them together and you can see that total, again, person-centered piece is seeing that total picture of the individual, so that I can know, oh, this is so-and-so's nightmares, but this is also their dreams. And so I can start to put a picture, I can start to plan instructionally better for them. I can start to plan what our next IEP meeting is going to look like, because I know a little bit more about them. So I know that this is where we really need to focus on for our behavioral goal. This is where we really need to focus on for our social skills goal. Or this is really where we need to focus on for this goal, because now I know I have a better picture about them. And it's just not about the system and what we have as our curriculum, which we need to follow, but it's also about what the student, what their real needs are. It's an individualized education plan for a reason. And so that's why we need to look at the person first and what their needs are, so that we can incorporate that into what we're doing in the system. Planning alternatives. PATH is Planning Alternatives Tomorrows with Hope, again created by Martha Forrest and Jack Pierpoint. PATH is really something, it's done a lot in the adult services world. You really should be trained to do a PATH, to be a PATH facilitator. But I want to mention it to you because it is a great way. PATHs have been done in schools. There's people all over the state who do know how to do PATHs and have been called into school systems, especially when there's a little harder cases and we're trying to get families together on the same page so that we can put a successful plan in place for individuals who are going to graduate and go out into the community, and we're trying to plan a better quality of life for them. But it's a great thing, especially for students with autism, because again, it's a graphic facilitation of what your future is going to be. It's highly effective because it puts those supports and services in place, and it develops that plan for your future. You set a goal, and then as part of the journey, the PATH is a journey, you set actions and you achieve those goals and you record them. So let's take a look at just kind of what Marcia and Jack put in place as their template. The star at the top is the long-term goals and ideas and the outcomes. You can see that step 2 is by this time what we're going to do next year. So maybe you have a student, maybe just have a short-term goal of driving. And so you put the steps in place. For instance, number 6 is putting the strategies in place for that progress towards driving. Then you go through the first steps, the actions, the goals, who are you going to help, who are you going to enroll is step 4 to help you with those things. And number 3, where are you currently? So maybe you're not driving at all. Maybe you've never even taken the driver's test. So 4, you would enroll driver's ed instructor. Maybe you also have help from your parents, et cetera, et cetera. But the great part is you actually draw that out and you talk about it, and you include the person. So we're not just talking about this at some transition plan meeting, and we say, oh, would you like to drive, or maybe you can't drive, or do you have the capabilities of driving, or maybe driving isn't for you right now. We really talk about it, and we say, hey, is this something that's really going to happen? If it is, we've got to map it out, and we've got to say, here's who's going to help you. Here's the checklist of what's going to happen and by when. And we're going to record these along the way, and you're going to be accountable, and we're going to help you be accountable, but you are accountable as well. And that's part of what's important about person-centered planning. It's been really successful with transition because we can have a meeting before the meeting. And I know, again, that takes time. I understand that. I really do. But time up front is worth it so that we're not sitting at those meetings, the IEP meetings and the transition meetings, going over things. We've already built and established relationships with folks and the individual. We've already established those relationships, and we've already decided who the student is, what their needs are, what their capabilities are. Hey, you are capable of doing this. So let's really sit down and map out a plan. We did a path, and we decided here's the things we're going to do. So here's what we're going to put in the transition plan based on that. Or hey, we did some maps, and we decided here's what you're really afraid of, but here's what you're capable of. And so we're going to put this as part of the IEP or in the transition plan. This is how we take person-centered and we make it work in the system. I understand this is a very, very brief overview, but I just want to encourage us to think of taking person-centered, listening more to the individual and what their true needs are, and really incorporating that into what we do. During a person-centered meeting, if you have a meeting outside of an IEP, this is me really saying this is a meeting outside of an IEP meeting or a transition meeting. This is a meeting where you say, again, you have that dedicated team, and maybe you've done some maps, maybe you've even looked at some of the I'm Determined tools, and you just talk about them with that dedicated team of individuals, and you're just getting to know the person and their team outside of the meeting, outside of the school meetings. What assistive technology might that individual need during the meeting? Do they need an iPad? Do they need their Autism device? Do they just need their textbook? What do they need? Remember, we're talking about individuals with autism who have communication needs. Do they need a notebook? What do they need? What type of prompts may they need during the meeting? Remember, not all of our individuals with autism are going to speak up. Do they need the prompt to say, so and so, what would you like to contribute to the meeting? Or now it's your turn to speak about this. What would you like to say about this? Just like any good educator would, we need to continue to remember to include them in the meeting by including those prompts. Is there a visual agenda? A lot of times we go into meetings and we forget that the individuals who are in the meeting may need that visual agenda to follow along with us. And a lot of members of the meeting might benefit from it as well. And have they practiced ahead of time? Remember, our students with autism, sometimes they need additional time of practice to say what they want and to say it where they feel comfortable. So sometimes practicing those pieces that they want to say is really beneficial to them. Again, looking at the assistive technology piece, I already mentioned iPads and Autism devices. Here's an example of a visual agenda. Just knowing who the participants are. Again, you can just get a piece of chart paper and write agenda on it, and maybe just put who the participants are and what's going to happen that day, or maybe you draw pictures. Again, a visual representation of what's going to happen so everybody's on the same page in that meeting. Again, I've spoken a little bit about this throughout the presentation, but how do we incorporate the tools I've talked to you about today into the system-centered world, which is the schools? Again, in IEP planning, the OnePager especially is a great way to incorporate a student's strengths and preferences into that present level of performance. Actually, in a lot of counties across the state, we've had special education departments actually include that as part of their present level of performance, so that when anyone gets that right off the bat, they know something about that student, and it actually includes a student picture. We've also had counties take video of that student along with that video, or along with that template, and send it to teachers as well. So that's really really fascinating. It has worked really well. Again, you establish, again, very person-centered. You establish a relationship with that student right off the bat. You know something positive about them, and it's about the person FBA, BIP meetings, functional behavior assessment, and behavior intervention plans. We've had people all across the state who have taken the Good Day Plan and actually used that to be a part of their functional behavior assessment meetings. They've sat down with the students and said, okay, here's the problem behaviors that we're finding. So how could we deter that? What do you think would help make it better for you? And they use the Good Day Plan. Again, being person-centered is, again, it's not about the form. We do have to fill out the forms in the system. We do have to go through the process, but we're including the person. We're making it person-centered. It is about them. It's about them. And the interventions aren't going to work unless we know what works for them. So it has to be person-centered. Transition planning should be all about the person. We should be having as many meetings before the meeting that we have before transition planning to understand what works for the person and what we want their employment to look like, their living to look like. And we have to bring all those players to the table, those outside agencies. We should be having conversations before we get to the table about that. And having those person-centered planning meetings is really, really important in doing that. Parent conference night, again, I think about the younger folks, those pre-K, kindergartners, early elementary folks. The IEP planning is good, but also those parent conference and those parent nights are a great way to bring the one-pager, what's working, what's important to me, what's important for me, to the conference and say, I did this with your child, and here's what I find out about them. And then the parent can say, oh, that's great. Well, here's something else that you should know. And just showing off the individual and that you're taking interest in their child, and you're really making their quality of life in school person-centered, and that you're taking interest in them of what's not only what's going on at school, but what's going to happen to them after school as well. Just quickly, I've talked a little bit about this, but I think being person-centered, again, I know that there's lots of schools out there that are person-centered that say, yes, we do care about the individuals, and we are taking strides to be more about the individual and really taking time to build better relationships with all individuals, especially individuals with autism, that we understanding their needs better. But you can really build a better relationship with a student, again, especially with our students with autism, knowing their strengths and their interests. I had a student who was fascinated by fans, and he was in elementary school, and he would run to every door in the elementary school building that had a fan. And so finally, a lot of teachers didn't really like that, and so finally one day I had went to a few teachers and said, do you mind if we stop by your classroom sometimes and check on the fan? So I also talked to the individual, and I said, on these days we're going to stop by these classrooms and we're going to check and see if the fan is working. We're going to say hello, and then we're going to walk out. And we talked about what times we were going to do that in the morning. It wasn't easy at first, but throughout that time, the teachers that we stopped in those classrooms and the administrator finally understood what I was doing. I was building relationship with the teachers and with the students in that building to understand that my student with autism wasn't weird or didn't understand what was going on because he had this fascination with fans, that it was really about who he was. This individual could take apart a fan and put it back together better than anybody I knew, and this individual was in the first grade. He knew more about fans. He knew everything about a fan, every part about a fan. As reinforcement, a lot of times we would get on the computer and he would look at fans. Instructionally, we included fans in a lot of things that we did. But I think the most important thing is, I'd love to know where he is now, because I'd always say that he would be the best salesman at Lowe's in the fan section, and I truly mean that, because this was his passion. So those things are very, very important for our students with autism. That's being person-centered. That's I know those was his strengths. It was definitely his interests. Knowing that he could do that with fans means I could translate that to other things. If he could take apart a fan, what else mechanically could he do? Where else could I put him in a math class or a science class that he could understand those things, and I could be a better teacher for him? So not only did I strengthen my relationship, I strengthened my relationship with administrators. And administrators can build relationships with our students by understanding those things as well. We can understand administrators can better strengthen and understand relationships with parents and guardians if we have those person-centered meetings outside of our regular school meetings. And you can have your instructional time back. You can have students have their instructional time back because they're not in your office because they went around looking at fans. We made it person-centered. We realized that that's something that they needed. We gave it to them a few times during the week, and we incorporated it into their instruction. We made it about them. Again, benefits from the staff are really the same. Again, those individualized instructional interventions. Yes, we had a curriculum. Yes, we followed it. Yes, we did the IEP goals, but I definitely used his love and his preference and interest of fans in a lot of things that we did. And it just bettered his quality of life in school. For him, it made him enjoying coming into school better. It made, again, I would love to know where he's at, because hopefully he has a job somewhere working on fans or selling fans or doing something mechanically, because that was one of his major strengths. And for students, it's really all about the student or the individual. It's again, building and improving relationships with peers and the school staff. Getting to know that again, it's not just that individual with autism who has these unusual interests or strengths. It's about that total person. It's about knowing who they are and that they do have amazing capabilities and gifts, and how can we use that to their benefit. It's about improving their behavioral outcomes again, and it's about setting short-term and long-term goals, and ultimately it's just about improving their quality of life. If we give them the communication tools, if we adapt things, their learning style, the way they learn, the way they communicate, and we give that back to them, we will improve their quality of life. But if we say they're nonverbal, they don't have the cognitive ability to do this, then we're doing them a disservice. Please know that all of the individuals, no matter where they are on the spectrum, have the ability and the capacity to learn, to communicate, and have the right for a better quality of life, especially when we make it person-centered. This is a quote from Ben Franklin that I've used before and I really, really like. Tell me and I'll forget. Teach me and I'll remember. Involve me and I'll learn. I thank you again for joining me today. This is something I'm very, very passionate about. For more information, again, I've probably mentioned I'm Determined a million times now, but it's a very important project. And I just can't tell you enough about the wonderful people that work on that project and the work that they do. Please contact them. Please visit that website. Also, you can go to the inclusionmaps.com or inclusion.com/maps. On the left is the Person-Centered Planning book that I was talking to you about, Beth Mount. I love the way that it's detailed and just very, the ability to be able to read it is just quickly. It tells you some great ways to do maps with individuals and build a profile so that you've got a good way of looking at that individual. And then, of course, Maps and Paths by Jack Pierpoint. So that's really important. Again, please contact me if there's anything you'd like to know more about. Today was a brief overview, but I really appreciate your time. Again, my name is Teresa Cogar here at VCU-ACE. Thanks so much for your time. Thank you.